Is a Tuesday morning. I cannot believe it is February of 2026. I've got people both online and in person here. We are going to go over the ER today, and we're going to go over it as if you are, or I am talking with my seller and trying to explain what I'm asking them to sell. Now, there'll be a few times where I'll jump out of that context, but that's the idea of today's conversation. And I would love to tell you that I will do this in 1 hour, but that is highly unlikely. Most likely I will get through halfway through this document. It's an 8-page document. And so we are going to get started here. If you have questions online, you'll have to unmute. I cannot see you online or see the chat. So if there's something that comes up, please let me know. So seller conversation. I started this last year. I kind of changed up how I presented the purchase contract because I realized agents were struggling talking to their clients about the document. In the past, I've always gone over the document as if you are a professional, you need to know these things about the document. And instead today, we're going to do it as if I'm talking to my client, the seller, whose listing I am going to take. Now, one of the reasons for this, oh, hey, look at this. Look at this picture. What is wrong with this picture? What is wrong with this picture? Okay, so you've got the agent on one side. You can see the Realty One Group on their laptop. They send over that e-sign program. And how long does that client look at that? 3 minutes. Did they read those, well, 8 or 15 or 22 pages? No. Really? Come on, you mean I don't get to just email it off and have them, whoops, sign it, and they've read everything, they understand the whole thing, they're all good to go, right? Yeah, not so good. Whose responsibility is that they understand what they're signing? Oh, everybody's quiet. How about yours? Okay, so let's talk about the residential listing contract exclusive right to sell or rent. I'm going to focus on the sell part here, not the rent. We will go over a couple of the items regarding the rent, but the focus is going to be on the listing side, okay? So first of all, this is the September of 2025 version. Let me ask all of you folks, if you remember, is there another option when I'm listing residential property? Or is this the only document out there you can use? Does anybody know? Hmm? Does anybody else know what the EA is? It's called exclusive agency. So agency versus right. Okay, if you have the right to do something and it's the exclusive right, you're the only one that has the right to sell that property. Exclusive agency grants the seller, and in this case, we call it the owner, right? The owner, the right to sell it themselves. And guess what? You don't get a commission if they sell it themselves. Now, you can work out with them that you will still represent them and handle the actual contract if they bring a buyer to the table, and that's not going to be the same thing you have listed in this ER for your compensation. And we'll get to that as we get to that section. But I do want you to know there is an EA and an ER. Please make sure you are selecting the ER unless you understand all the repercussions of granting your seller that right to do it on their own. We've got an agent here today that is dealing with an owner trying to sell her property that was listed on the MLS as just a post on the MLS. The agent is doing nothing. And she's clueless. They went there today. There was an inspection going on. She told them they were not under contract, but apparently they went under contract last week. Who cares, right? What's a few words? Doesn't really matter. Seriously, if you want to work with a seller or an owner and let them talk to 16 people and all of a sudden decide they've found the buyer, please understand if you wrote an EA, yep, see ya, all your photos, everything else you did, you do not get reimbursed for. You're done, okay? So let's go into the framework of talking to my owner, okay? Owner dash seller. I like on the listing side to focus on these documents being owner and broker. If you're doing a listing contract addendum, you are going to look for the listing contract addendum, which is between an owner and a broker. If you're saying you need an addendum, please don't get the one that just says addendum on top, because that is between a buyer and a seller. You are not even mentioned on it. Okay, so focus on exclusive right to sell. It is between the owner and the broker. So Matt here. Matt, I'm looking forward to walking you through the listing contract today. So Matt and I are going to have a conversation. Matt, I am the agent and I work for Realty One Group. Realty One Group is the brokerage. They are the broker. When you see the word broker, it is representing Realty One Group, right? And I work for Realty One Group. Now let's make sure I've got the right address and the legal description as well as the assessor's number. Now I've come in already filling this out, but I want to let them know that I have looked it up. Where do I look up the address to make sure I've got the assessor number and the legal description, folks?
Monsoon.
Monsoon. Where do I look up the address and the assessor number? Yes, that's in Monsoon, our real estate tax access. You could also go to maricopa.assessor.gov if you want to go there. But does anybody know, what do we sell the property by? The address or the assessor number? The assessor number. So if that line is missing, are you really selling a property? Are you selling the right property? It's a big problem, and I can tell you title is going to want that, but we are also going to flag that. So Matt, we're going back to Matt here. I've looked this information up. This is your assessor number, and here is the legal description. So the legal description is something that is listed in Monsoon, and it talks about the property. It talks about the MCR. Does anybody know what MCR stands for? What does MCR stand for? We have title in the house. That's who's been answering these title questions. Maricopa County Records, because we are in the county of Maricopa. That is where you would find the information on that plat of land, because property is sold by land first and then what is built on top of the land. That's why we don't sell it by the address, right? There was no address for that piece of land. It's the assessor number. Okay, let's go on. So Matt, we're going under contract here today. You are giving the exclusive right to sell between the owner and the listing broker. In consideration for my finding you listing broker's agreement to find a ready, willing, and able buyer, owner gives the listing broker the exclusive and irrevocable right to sell the premises described above. This would be the time for them to say, oh, you know what? I also want to put it up for rent. Yeah, we didn't talk about that, but okay, right? Because then I'm going to change my documents. There's a lot of other things involved. So let's hope we've had that conversation before we have the ER completed. And understand, owner, that if you sign more than one ER or other listing contract, you could be liable for additional compensation. In other words, please don't sign with another agent. That would cause a problem, okay? Now, we've talked about the price, hopefully before this meeting, but if you are in your very first meeting, you probably brought this with a blank line in the sale box. You can hand print that name in there or the price in there. That's fine in front of them. If you're doing this on paper, that's okay, right? The listing price shall be whatever it is. Let's just say $500,000. Let's just be nice and easy on that. And so, and then it says the listing price shall be blank or rent per month, right? And such other price and terms as are accepted by the owner. Very important, Matt. We need to set the start date for this agreement. anytime we're signing a contract, we have to have a start date and end date. So we will put the start date today. I understand we haven't taken photos yet. Don't worry, I'll explain later how we're going to bump that start date to when we actually, not the start date, but the date it goes on the market when we begin marketing the property. But you're going to hire me today, okay? If that's what the agreement has been. Your goal is to try and get your listing and then work it on the advertising, okay? So the agreement will commence on today and shall expire at 11:59 p.m. on no more than how many days, guys? Gonna ask your input on this. I know I'm talking to Matt, but how long can I write a listing agreement? Can I write a 18-month listing agreement? 1 year, okay? 1 year. That is an Arizona revised statute. That is not a Realty One group. That is the state of Arizona. And if you write it for more than 1 year, it is the one time we are absolutely contacting you and saying, this must be changed or you will have to cancel the contract. You cannot have it for more than a year. Okay. So you have to modify that. Now, little tip just for you guys. I like to end my listing contracts on the last day of the month. This has caused major angst for people that are used to doing that because, okay, today's February 3rd. So I want to run it till February 28th of 2027. Yeah, you can't do that. January 31st of 2027 is just fine. The reason I like to run it to the last day of the month is because if you start doing a lot of transactions, that gives you exactly 12 days in a year that you're going to have contracts ending, rather than 365 days. If you start doing 10, 12 listings at a time or have buyer contracts, and now we have buyer broker agreements with all sorts of end dates, it's really hard to remember all of those. If you miss a listing date contract that expires, and you are alerted, by the way, there are systems 10 days prior to alert you. But trust me, if you're busy and you've got a bunch of these popping up, oh yeah, I'll get to that. I'll get to that. My recommendation is that pick another day. It doesn't matter. Pick the 15th of the month. Does not matter. Choose a date. I don't recommend doing exactly 12 months out. If you're doing 6 months, that's fine, but still pick a date that you're going to do it so you don't have every day of the month every day of the year that could have a listing expire. In ARMLS, if that listing expires, you lose control of that listing. You cannot modify it. You cannot change the price, terms, or close of escrow date. What happens then if it bumps out? They push it out 2 days and you can't control it. It goes ahead and shows up that it's closed, even if it isn't closed. Then I have to go in and try to fix it with ARMLS to get that modified, but we no longer have control of the listing. That's why that's so important, okay? So, Matt, upon execution of the contract for sale or lease of the premises, all rights and obligations of this agreement will automatically extend through the date of the actual closing of the sale and lease agreement. That's great, right? You get to continue. Let's say you get under contract 5 days before your listing expires. Still ask them to push that listing out at least through 5 days after close of escrow, and then agree, look, if we don't sell, I will cancel. I'll get out of your hair. I know my listing was expiring. We got a contract right at the last minute. It's the control of the MLS is the issue. Your commission is locked. Your role to complete your job is locked past that expiration date. Because if you are under contract, the contract continues to allow you to do your job. Does that make sense? Purchase contract. Okay. So, whoops. Uh-oh, I did that bad. Capacity. Really, really important. The owner, Matt, they are saying that they are able to warrant that they have the legal capacity, full power, and authority to enter into this agreement. Some of you folks work with probates, you work with estates, you work with trusts. You got to find out how many people are in those documents. Does the LLC say 6 people have to sign? Because guess what? Then 6 people have to sign. One guy goes, hey, yeah, I got all the authority. I'm good. Yeah. Maybe need to double check that. Hey, could I see that part of your LLC articles of incorporation, please? Or the trust. I don't want to see the whole trust. but I want to see who can sign on behalf of the trust to purchase or obligate or sell a property, real property, right? Not personal property, but real property, right? So yes, and while you're talking to them, you can say, just want to make sure that you understand that you are saying that you have the ability and authority, full power to deliver marketable title to the premises and consummate the transaction completely, right? So,
I got a question, Melissa.
yep.
That's all right. So what happens if you're dealing with a married couple, they're older, one of them is dealing with like Alzheimer's or some sort of a mental condition like that. Would just because let's say the wife is fully competent and the husband may not be, does that make it valid for her to be able to sign on his behalf of everything, or how does that work out?
So if there are a husband and wife, can one of them sign on the other's behalf? Can one part of a couple sign a contract without the other?
I didn't think so, but
No. So the fact that one of them is incompetent or unable to sign means there needs to be legal documentation to allow the other person to be their specific power of attorney.
hmm.
That is a very challenging situation. And no, the person can't just say, oh, it's okay, I can sign for my husband. No, you can't. This is a legal document. Under the state of Arizona, can somebody just sign on somebody else's behalf? No. Right? And better is when you've got a trust and you have successor trustees and there are three of them and one comes in and says, oh, I can sign for everybody. No, you can't. There are three people. What do the other two people want to do? Oh, I don't know. Or I do know, and I don't want you to know. I just want to get the property sold, right? And then they get a rude awakening because the money doesn't go to them. It actually goes to the trust and they can't touch the trust. But that's another story. But no, if there are two parties, and here's the thing, when you went to those tax records, you can go beyond Monsoon and click in to see who's actually on the deed, right? See who's on that deed and see how they have title. What I love is the person that says, oh yeah, my mom just died. I inherited the property. I can sell the property. It's still in mom's name. Really? Okay. Could you show me that you inherited the property somehow? Because you didn't record the documents with the county to change it at the county yet. So do you really have the authority to sell this property? I don't know. Do you want to do all your work on your listing and not get paid because the person doesn't actually have the authority to do that? I think you need to do a little research. Okay. So modification. Guess what? Sir, if there's any modification to this, Matt, we just need to make sure that both you and I get to sign on behalf of the listing broker that we are both signing something and it has to be in writing, okay? And just so you understand, yeah. Uh-huh.
We need to have documentation of that, like, we need to take a game record of it, just for our purposes, or no?
I would. Now, again, you do not want the entire trust. You do not want the entire will. They can, blot out whatever they don't want.
Yeah.
You just need to know that they do have the authority to do that. And if it's not a trust, if they're a personal representative, that is a court order that they are assigned as the personal representative. I always like the son says, oh yeah, I'm the executor. I got you covered. Like, no, you can be written as the executor, but until the court says you are the personal representative, they got to go to court to get that done. That's not us. That's what the Arizona law says. They got to go to court and be assigned as the personal representative. Even if the document says, well, you're the personal representative. Oh, is Jen getting up to tell me something different? No, okay. All right. My legal eagle over there is like, wait. So just double checking. Okay. So okay, with Matt, I'm not going to go over this very much. I'm pretty much going to say, please understand that as a listing broker and you, by hiring me, we agree that we're going to comply with federal, state, and local fair housing regulations. And I wouldn't sit there and read all of that. I would just leave it at that, right? We're going to comply with federal fair housing. You can come back up here if you want. There's seats. Oops, wait, compensation. I got to start there. Don't go anywhere. So look, I know there's been a lot in the news, Matt, about about real estate broker compensation. You have probably heard that not just listing broker, but buyer broker, any compensation with real estate deals is not set by law by any board, association, realtors, multiple listing services, or anything other than being negotiated between you as the seller, owner, and myself. You sit there. It's fine. Yeah, it's Rebecca. She's fine. So just understand that you, Matt, we're going to have a conversation about this, and I'm going to explain how these things work as a part of the transaction, okay? The buyer broker compensation is fully negotiable and agreed upon after discussion with the listing broker and after you get an offer, okay? When you get an offer, that's when that happens. So I'm sorry, I read that wrong, but it's just basically, it's saying the same thing. I just kind of flipped the words around. If the owner wants to choose to offer compensation to a buyer broker, it's negotiable when you get that offer in and after we'll talk about it. So you understand that, okay? Let's go to this section, right? Owner agrees to compensate listing broker if any, and any other broker, if any, as follows, okay? So it starts with the retainer, which I think is kind of confusing, but they want to just get that out of the way. Look, if you are a listing agent that has a retainer, this is going to apply to you. If you do not, then you're going to skip over this and say, I do not charge a retainer and move on. Okay. That's all you need to say to Matt, right? So otherwise, I'm going to say, look, Matt, this is a $500,000 home. I do a full photo package. I do a 3D tour of the property. I do a drone. And because I do all these things, and that's why you brought me on board, we talked about all my marketing. I do charge, I don't know, a $500 retainer fee. That is going to cover my marketing should you decide to cancel or we decide to end the agreement before we get a property, the property under contract. And once we go under contract, this fee shall or shall not be credited against my compensation. So you get the choice of how you want to do that. Usually we see this on the luxury properties. And I will say, oddly enough, this is the luxury properties that aren't the luxury properties, right? The out of the world, multi-million dollar properties. Actually, we don't see it much at all because they know what they're worth. People are usually if they're gonna get split up, they're gonna pay something at that point, or the agent's just like, whatever, we're moving on. So, but it is the people that are usually doing 700,000 to about 2 million that are like, I need to have my marketing covered. So it's up to you. This is your business. You determine how you want to do it, and that is totally fine. You're the one that has to explain it to the seller. And again, I could easily justify my 3D tour, my drone shots, my photo package, my touched up twilight photos, my brochures. I could throw all of that in and say, look, I need to be immersed $500 to $1,500, depending on what I'm doing, and say, look, I take that as a retainer. That means they're writing a check, right, within 5 days of execution of this agreement, and that check is written to Realty One Group. Yes. And guess what? You pay 10% of that to Realty One Group, because anytime we get something and have to cut a check to you, there is an amount that comes off of that. Now that 10% is credited when you sell the property. It is credited out of the rest of your transaction fee. Don't worry, we don't just take that randomly. So, but you do understand that comes out of there. Now, let's get to compensation, because Matt's sitting here waiting for this conversation, right? He's waiting for me to go over this, and he's ready to fight, right? It depends on your client, right? So if you've got clients that already know you, it's a totally different conversation. But if you're brand new and this is a brand new owner, this is the first time they've sold a property, there's gonna be conversation here. So, Matt, look, listing broker compensation, that's Realty One Group, that's me, right? If I produce a ready, willing, and able buyer for, in accordance with this agreement, for a sale of this property or these premises, right? Then you are going to agree to pay me. ... Right here. Let's go to the next page. And I brought that back up at the very top. This is listing broker compensation. Please note the word listing broker is there. Words, right? It's listing. Does not anywhere say listing and buyer broker, right? We're not talking to Matt now. I'm talking to you guys. But I do want Matt to understand this is just for me. This is only my compensation. This is for the work that I am going to put forward to get this home sold. And I am going to take XY percentage, whatever your choice of daily percentage is. This is part of you and who you are. What do you do for your clients and what do you charge for your clients? And trust me, we have people that do all sorts of different things. There can be a variety of factors there. It's a family member. This is the 5th house they've sold for these people. This is the first house, but they're selling this and buying something 3 times more expensive. They're going to get it on the other end, right? It's your choice, agents, right? But to Matt, this is my compensation. This is what I charge for all these things that we've already talked about, okay? So let me explain. That covers me. Now, we all know a buyer is going to be a part of this conversation. Buyer comes to an open house, says to me, Melissa, I want to buy this home. I know exactly what I want to offer. I do not need an agent. I don't care about, anything about representation. I'm good. I got it all covered. I've got my pre-qual in my hand. I just need you to write up the paperwork for me. That is called an unrepresented buyer. If you are a new agent with Realty One Group and this happens to you, call me immediately. I need to make sure you understand what an unrepresented buyer means and what work you will have to do for that. But with Matt, I'm talking about this because I need Matt to understand my agency is still with you, Matt. Okay. So Matt, I continue to work with you. I am simply filling in paperwork for the buyer who's unrepresented. And in terms of moving forward, if they ask me questions, my answer is you need to seek legal counsel or representation. You're unrepresented. I can't answer those questions for them. So my ability to continue to represent you, Matt, is protected. But it is a lot more work for me because I have to still get the paperwork out to this person. But here's the thing. Nobody's advising that buyer on the deadlines and what they have to do. I'm going to give them the contract and I may say, just a reminder, it's a 10-day inspection period, but I'm not calling them on day 10. That's not my job. Right? So I just want you to know, Matt, it is a lot of extra work and a lot of uncertainty as we proceed. Now, there are plenty of times it happens smoothly and there's no big deal, but you do need to understand this is a lot of work for me. And that is why if this occurs, you're going to compensate me additionally by this amount. Okay? It's not changing what was up above. It is adding a whole nother figure because what's up above is already locked in. Okay? XY% is already locked in. They're agreeing to pay me XY. But here's the problem. Now we're going to add this. Now there are some people that are like, oh, I'll just put a 0.5%. Trust me, you will never do that twice. You will never do that twice. I am not joking that this is a ton of work. We do not even want you sending e-signature to them. If you're going to do it, it's a 3-step process. Like you have no right to send an unrepresented person an e-signature document that you have filled out and all they're doing is stamping because you have then filled that out. Again, 3 minutes, they clicked through everything. Who's going to be responsible if there's a mistake? Oh, you are. So again, 3-step process. So we'll go over that. But to Matt, I just want to make sure he knows there is more involved here. Just want you to know this is what I charge. Okay. Now let's talk about a buyer broker. We know we hope we get other agents that bring their clients to this property. My marketing is going to bring them there. That's the whole idea, is we're going to get interest in your property, right? All I need to know, Matt, is if we get an offer on this property and it is at the price that we set, are you willing to compensate that buyer broker for their services and pay those fees? Okay. I need to know if you will or will not allow me to share that information. That's all I'm sharing. No number. You will see there is no number on these lines. I'm telling that to Matt. There is no delineated number. Okay. However, what I'm going to do when I do your estimate for what your profits are, right? Your sales sheet, to give you an idea of what you will net on this, I'm going to use Y%. So we know if you were to pay Y%, you know what your bottom line number is. If you get a full price offer, this is what your net is going to be, because ultimately, Matt, it's what your net is that you're concerned about, correct? You want a certain amount of dollars at the end of this. So as long as I show you what those dollars are you agreeable to pay a buyer broker? Now, I'm going to step away. Well, hold on a second. I'll go ahead and do the last paragraph. So Matt, understand that a buyer broker represents the interests of the buyer, not of you as the owner. And the listing broker, unless in a transaction, unless the agent, the listing broker, is representing both the owner and the buyer in a limited representation. My hope is that you've gone over agency first with your owner, your seller first. You need to do your owner, your agency form first. And this is where you would bring up, remember, we signed that agency form. And if we end up in a situation where they do ask me to be either a dual representative representing both the buyer and the seller, or another agent with Realty One Group, because look, the brokerage would then be covering both sides. Under a limited representation, you might have the broker covering both sides, and it might not be me. Okay, it's still limited representation. I just need to know that we're okay with these numbers, and I'm going to show you where those numbers come in. Okay. Now, if you are getting pushback, I'm going to take a break here real quick to make sure you understand that if you are getting pushback from saying that they want to pay any buyer broker, are you helping that seller buy a property? Because if you are, this would be the time to say, all right, let me ask you this. I've got my buyer broker packet right here to go over with you next. But the first thing I have to do is get you to sign a buyer broker agreement. And you understand that you're going to commit to pay me, again, some percentage or some dollar amount, you can use a flat rate, right? To help you buy a property. Understand, Mr. Seller, that all the buyers that are coming with agents walking onto these premises have already signed a buyer broker agreement. They have to have. So in my recommendation, it is better for you to agree to pay a buyer broker fee, because if you don't, it isn't saving the buyer any money. They've already committed to that. So if they're stuck on the amount of cash they can pull out of their pocket for the transaction, it would be better, as long as you're getting your net number, that we make sure you're made whole, if you will, by that net number that you want. Because if you say, no, I'm only going to pay you a few pennies, okay? The buyer's already agreed to pay this much more than those pennies, right? So it's not saving them when you're negotiating all these numbers, because they got to come out of pocket for that. And if they don't have enough money for their down payment because they got to pay their buyer broker, they're not going to be able to buy your house. So I would encourage you to keep that in mind, and keep in mind, part of what I do as a buyer broker is negotiate on your behalf with the seller on the other property, trying to get my compensation covered. And if the agents on the other side are doing the same thing, they're going to ask for that compensation to be covered. Now, there are instances where they won't. There are plenty of properties that are needing a ton of work. Investors are coming in. Those investor brokers are not being paid by the owner. They're being paid by the buyer, right? And that's totally fine. And that's part of the negotiation tool. But in this case, I got a $500,000 home. It's a regular home here in Scottsdale, small home, but it's a regular home here in Scottsdale for $500,000, right? So I'm just recommending you keep that in mind. I hope you will allow me to say that you are willing to provide compensation. Now, let me make it very clear. Look, somebody writes an offer at $425,000. I'm not expecting you to pay their full amount in buyer broker compensation, and have at it if that's the offer that we have that comes in, if you even want to respond, right? But I just need to make sure if you got a full price offer, would you be good with this? Here are where the numbers are. And you might even have to pull that sheet out right now. Okay? Because you've already prepared that. Hopefully you've had a conversation before this thing. If not, you're going to come back to that. Now, rental, I'm going to go over this very briefly just because I have to remind all of you that under the lawsuit, the rental section did not get affected. So if you look at the tenant broker employment agreement, it does not say this is the amount that the tenant broker will get. It says this is the amount the tenant broker will get, or in big capital letters, whatever the landlord will pay, whichever is greater. That's on the tenant broker agreement. So here, again, you need to get what you're getting as the listing broker for the lease. What are they paying you? A percentage or a dollar amount, right? If there is an unrepresented tenant, ding, 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 ding. How many times do we have unrepresented tenants on rental properties? Yay! Such fun. Almost 75% of the time, okay? So you're going to put a sign up, you're going to put it on Zillow, whatever, you're going to get calls on it. So be prepared for that. Again, don't put 0 there because you're only getting what number is on the top unless you add something below, okay? Do they allow you to tell, is the landlord agreeing to pay anything? This is where a flat rate might be a good thing to have a note. Mr. Landlord, Matt is a landlord. You agree to pay a couple $100, $500, $600, whatever it is, to a tenant broker. Just so you know what that is, that's fine. Does not have to be on here. Have something between the two of you. Same repeat of some of these paragraphs. Rental renewal or extension. If in fact you are negotiating to have the landlord pay you if the tenant renews, you need to put that in here. You need to keep track of that, folks, because we don't look at it in a year. Your file's closed in our books. So if that's the case, you need to be in touch with your landlord and following up. Most folks don't do that because most folks don't deal with them after a landlord's done. They move that file and they're done. Purchased by tenant. However, I would be putting something in here that if you do think it's a potential that the landlord will eventually sell this, you kind of want to be on the hook for being able to get some money on the sale of the property. So you need to put something in there for that, and probably write something in the back that says landlord agrees to compensate X% if it is sold to the tenant, right? So that you reactivate that. But come to me if that's the scenario. Now, let's move on. Look, we've got, I don't even know what page we're on, but so again, I'm talking to Matt here. Look, if there's a dispute between the listing broker and other brokers, you can't change the compensation that you previously offered, right? Any compensation between brokers shall be resolved after close of escrow. But here's the thing. The listing broker is no longer the one paying the buyer broker. So it's really between the sellers, which is kind of weird that this paragraph is still here. Because if there's a buyer broker agreement and a seller compensation addendum saying that the seller is paying that broker, I'm not quite sure where this really applies. I would just say in the event of a dispute that the owner can't revoke or seek to amend their compensation, and I would move on, okay? But you got to kind of explain what this dispute says. And that is what it says. Owner shall not revoke or seek to amend compensation previously offered. That's the key to this paragraph, okay? Withdrawn or cancel listings. The same amount of sale or rental compensation shall be due and payable if without consent of the listing broker, the premises is withdrawn from this agreement, i.e. the seller says I'm canceling, and then the owner conveys it to through any other broker otherwise. So if they call somebody else, say, hey, we're doing something else, too bad, so sad, we're kicking you out. Yeah, you can't do that. You can't just cancel this. It's a mutual contract, which means it needs what to cancel it? Mutual cancellation, not unilateral, mutual cancellation, okay? And this is really important, Matt. I need you to understand, I do not get paid until or when we close, and I get paid through escrow. You are not having to write me a check today or Realty One Group a check today for this amount. We don't even know the purchase price, right? We're putting a list price out, but payment is made through escrow or through rent at the end if you want to talk about that, but we'll do more.
The compensation, if, let's say, both parties are at stalemate, we'll just say $2,000, and both agents said, hey, we're gonna cut our commissions just to cover the cost. Do you need an amendment to this, or is it just something you deal with escrow?
No, you would actually do a credit on your, well, it depends on where the difference is. Usually the seller is saying, I won't go below this and the buyer won't go above this. There are different ways to do it, but you would not amend this necessarily. Usually we can just do it as a part of your, compensation distribution instructions, your commission distribution instructions, CDI for our thing. And sometimes they want you to write all this convoluted stuff up. Please call me, because oftentimes we get multiple documents going back and forth that are kind of contradicting each other and not going to the right entities. The big thing is you need to tell your seller if you're giving up some of your compensation, but you don't have to change this. You can just credit it to title. In the paperwork, title will then make that credit on the document. Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay. So this is an interesting one that is often misread. And in terms of talking to Matt about this, look, Matt, I just want to let you know, I seriously don't think we're going to last 6 months on the market, but in the rare case that we do, right? I'm very full of myself, and I should be. I am selling this property and I want my owner to know that I'm confident in what I'm going to do, right? But if in this scenario, we get to that expiration date, and all of a sudden, after the expiration, somebody that has seen the property comes by and knocks on your door. And this is more prevalent right at the end when you're wrapping things up. And gee, it's funny because the seller goes, yeah, just hang on. My listing expires in a week. I got you covered. We can do this without the agent, right? And I'm not joking, that happens, right? So that really does happen. That's why this paragraph is there, right? But if I've shown them the property, if they've come through all the time that I've had that listing, and the owner makes this little side deal with them, no agents involved, and it's within 60 days or whatever days you put there. And by the way, I wouldn't put 10 days, because that conversation, the guy knocking on the door 2 weeks out, just 2 weeks. My listing expires in 2 days and I got 2 weeks. I got you covered. And they do. Put something that's at least a little painful, put at least 45, 60, 90 days, right? That you've got some time there. Now, I will tell you, it doesn't even matter at all, because number 2 is there. So actually, number 1, within 60 days after expiration of this agreement, and there's a big unless. I really wish that were in big, bold type, right? Unless the premises has been listed on exclusive basis with another broker. In other words, another ER with somebody else, right? Because if they've signed that, you're done. Doesn't matter, right? And trust me, there are, what are they called? Ambulance chasers. They don't know the exact date the listing expires, But there are people out there that go, oh, how many bets it was a 6-month listing? Let me go check these out, right? And they're knocking on doors saying, I can sell this property. I've got buyers for this property, blah, 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 right? So they'll write an ER, and once yours expires, they're under a contract with another ER. So all I'm sharing with the seller at this time is, please understand that if I've shown the property and this expires and you make some type of deal with that person after that time, then you still owe compensation to me. They can dive a little deeper into the rest of that, the unlesses. And if they ask you about them, tell them to them. I'm not saying blow over that, but the key is that, you know, they need to know that they can't just on day 2, you know, go ahead and sell it to somebody else and squeeze me out of the picture. Okay. Failure to complete. Hey, Matt, look, if the completion of this sale is prevented by default of the owner, okay, or with the consent of the owner, the entire sale is appropriate, or I'm sorry, the entire sale compensation shall be paid to the listing broker. In other words, if they default in the middle of a contract, they owe compensation to the listing broker. Guess what, folks? It does not say they owe compensation to the buyer broker on there because there's no buyer broker compensation in here. But the listing broker is covered. If there's earnest money deposit because the buyer cancels for some reason, right, and it's forfeited, owner shall pay a brokerage fee equal to lesser of 1/2 the deposit or the full amount of compensation. Most agents miss this, and then they figure it out at the end, and then they go after their owner or seller. You have to decide how you're going to do that, but you need to let the person know, look, there is a brokerage fee equal to 1/2 the earnest deposit or the full amount, the lesser of, right, which would be 1/2 most likely. If for some reason the buyer defaults and there's earnest money on the line, so just understand that there could be compensation required. If you end up in that scenario, you need to have that conversation before you get to the end of that period on whether or not you're going to ask for that, or if you're going to be like, look, seller, you keep that. We're just going to pick up and I'm going to get marketing and get this sold again for you and move on. That is completely, again, up to you. It's your business and your structure of how you want to handle that. Construction. Look, Matt, construction just means that the law, the Arizona laws, and it has to follow Arizona laws in terms of how this is designed, this agreement, right? Construed. It has to comply with the laws. If for some reason there's express disagreement between any provision of this agreement and the law, it has to be modified to be in compliance with the law. That's it. Move on. If they have a question about it, then read more closely. But all right, we're going to hopefully get through this section and then we'll pick up again after the office meeting in 2 weeks. Let me move it just a little out of the way. So Matt, I just want to make sure you understand that anything that's a fixture that is attached on this property conveys with the property. So and I know, look, the stove pulls out, but it's considered attached. It's a part of it's a part of the property that you sell. The stove, the dishwasher, the range hood, or the microwave that's built in, or a trash compactor, it's a part of the property. And in addition to that, guess what? Those beautiful big TVs that are mounted in your living room, TV belongs to you, but the mounting bracket needs to stay. And there are 2 reasons for this, folks. Think about it. If you take the TV off, you got the mounting bracket there. Great. Somebody else can buy the other side of the mounting bracket, hopefully. But if you remove that mounting bracket with moving out of the property, guess what you have? You got a bunch of holes in the wall. Okay. Somebody would have to fix that. Much easier to leave the mounting bracket to let the buyer deal with fixing the wall or using the mounting bracket. Yay. But you don't have to all of a sudden fix the wall and try to touch up the paint. And they're like, that was a 20-foot wall. The whole wall has to be painted. Oh, now that doesn't match the other wall. Oh, look, now you need to paint the rest of it. Just leave the mounting bracket. You want to say the TV's offered, that's fine, but the bracket is what has to stay. And by the way, those drapes, the drapes are beautiful and you can take the drapes, but it says that the drapery and curtain rods stay. There are what are mounted on the wall, okay? Is there anything, Matt, that you do not want to convey that is attached? You've got a special alarm system and you've got 6 cameras all over and you want to take all your cameras. Just remember that you need to repair when you remove those cameras what you're going to do, but we need to write that in here so we make sure on your listing that a buyer knows they're not getting those things. Okay. So Matt, that's what we want to make sure of. And this is a great item, a time to talk about, if we haven't talked about solar yet, I should have seen that walking up, or I should have seen it in the overhead photos from Google, right? That if there's a solar system, is it leased? Is it owned? What is the deal with that? Do you have the contract, security system, water softeners? By the way, the in-ground pool and spa, any mechanical or cleaning systems, there's, what are the little, the little vacuum thingies for the pools? Those stay, they don't go with the seller. They're part of the property, right? Oh no, it's my sweeper. No, it belongs to the property. You can't move those. Yeah, but it's not attached. It just hangs on the wall. It's on little hooks. No, it stays with the equipment, right? The pool stays, all of the pool equipment, not your toys, but the equipment actually do convey. Okay, so make sure, Matt, that all those things stay. I know you have, one of the latest pool vacuum systems that you drop in and leave in there, a couple of nights a week. Maybe you pull them out when the kids are swimming, but those stay. Please understand that, okay? Additional existing personal property. While you're in the home taking that ER, please go through and write down what refrigerator, washer, dryer stay with the property if they're going to convey. And by the way, let's see, there's a freezer, there's a refrigerator in the garage. Are those included? Please make sure you know what those are if they're staying on the property. If they're not, that's fine. Oh, and the best is when the owner is going to take the fridge that's in the kitchen and that 20-year-old refrigerator in the garage is the one that they're going to leave on the property. Yeah, for fridge. I said there was a fridge staying. I didn't say it was the piece of junk in the garage. Guess what the buyer is going to think they're getting? Oh, the one as seen on date we showed the property. I love the purchase contract. As seen on XY, whatever, January 15th. Well, you saw both of them. Which one were you talking about, right? I don't know. What was the one in the MLS photos? Well, it says in the MLS that fridge doesn't stay. Oh, okay. So what is the contract telling you? So again, please write, it's a GE side-by-side stainless steel. You can even say fingerprint stainless steel, right? The special fingerprint coating that you touch it and doesn't leave fingerprints. Just describe it, right? It's a stainless with French doors, which are the double doors, right? With the freezer on the bottom and with an ice maker and water thing on the front. Describe it. Or if you're there as a buyer's agent, get the model number, right? Serial number. It's something that actually describes. Because guess what happens if the refrigerator that you write as a buyer's agent ends up being the one that's from the garage? Who's buying a refrigerator? Buyer's agent's buying a refrigerator. Yay! So as a listing agent, make sure you have the conversation. What items are you leaving here? Are you leaving the refrigerator, washer, and dryer, right? Are you leaving an above ground spa, which yes, may be wired, but that is personal property. They come in and unwire it, close up the wires. That's fine. Is that staying or is that going, right? You've got a gazebo and somebody's like, this is my favorite gazebo. My daughter got married under the gazebo. I've got to take the gazebo. You better be writing down the gazebo is not staying, right? Because in Arizona, that gazebo is affixed to the ground because otherwise it'd be in the neighbor's yard or 3 or 4 neighbors over yard, right? So please make sure, Matt, we're going to talk about all these things. Let's make sure we get everything down here, right? And here's most important, when we get an offer, Matt, you and I both need to look to make sure that the items they're requesting are what you are willing to keep. So when we get that purchase offer, we need to make sure we're looking through what they're asking for. And you're not giving up something that you said you didn't want to give up. Because what is written in the MLS, folks? Is that the contract? No, and if it said in the MLS that the chandelier in the master bathroom does not convey, and the contract doesn't say chandelier does not convey, guess what happens? The chandelier conveys. And seller is screaming at you because that was their grandmother's chandelier, right? And they want that chandelier. Guess what? Somebody better be negotiating with the buyer's agent to try and figure out how that chandelier can convey. Because unless it's in the contract, doesn't matter what's in the MLS. In fact, the MLS says buyer and seller, to verify all this data, it is not the contract. So make sure that you are aware of that. I'm trying to check my timing here. Leased or not owned items. All right. There is a new solar addendum. I'm not going to talk about that today. I am going to say, if you have anything that is leased, alarm systems are the one that seem to be popping up this year. Hey, I thought the alarm system was staying. It's supposed to convey. Oh, nope, they're ripping it out because it was leased. What do you mean it's being ripped out? It said there was an alarm system. Well, just because it says there was an alarm system doesn't mean it was owned versus leased. But guess what? In the seller property disclosures, the seller said it was an owned system. Somebody better figure out how to get an alarm system in because the buyer bought a home with an alarm system. And somehow the seller is now saying, whatever it is, the alarm company is coming to pick it up. Somebody's got to fix that. So please understand, and that Matt, is your alarm system owned? You don't pay, you pay a monthly fee, but is the monthly fee only a monitoring fee or is it also for leased equipment? Please confirm that. Because if you sign a purchase contract that says, and you said it was owned, that system's staying and you're going to have to figure out how you're paying the alarm company for that equipment, which they obviously didn't want to do because they leased it 5 years ago. They sure as heck don't want to buy it now. So, right? So you got to work on that, okay? Propane tanks, these come into play, folks, when you don't have gas in certain communities. People have 100 or 200 gallon tanks in their backyard or side yard to cover a pool heater, a spa heater, a stove, a fireplace. And somebody comes and fills those tanks. They call and get delivery of propane. If that's leased and the buyer thinks that propane tank is staying, you got to know whether it's staying or not, right? So, or what is the lease option to give if the buyer wants to take over the lease? How can they do that? Water softeners, the other thing, a lot of people lease water softeners. They don't buy them. So just please make sure, and that's where you want the seller, we want Matt to tell me, don't include this, right? Fixtures not included in the sale or rental of the property. All right, I'm going to do this. This is the last one. I honestly recommend you do agency first with buyers or sellers. So Matt, I want to make sure you understand, and usually I would do this first. So we'd get to this section. I'd say, this is what we talked about initially with the agency form. But the listing broker shall represent the owner in any resulting transaction during the term of this agreement, except as specified if you're doing limited or unrepresented thing there. Unless otherwise agreed, listing broker acts as owner's agent only. Keyword there is only. I wish that were in big bold print there. And has the duties of, see, I could cover those up. I can't cover them here. Old car, if you want to do that. Carload is another way to do that, right? Loyalty, obedience, disclosure, confidentiality, and accounting. There are some that add another one there. As other duties imposed by the Department of Real Estate. Owner acknowledges that the broker may show prospective buyers the premises, and this does not constitute a conflict of interest. Why is that important? You want Realty One Group agents to show your properties, right? If you don't sign on the agency form that you're allowing other Realty One Group agents to show the property, you're limiting 30 to 100 agents in Maricopa County from being able to view your property. Don't think you want to do that, right? Now, I've had scenarios that they said, no, I want you to only represent me. I do not want a limited representation. I'd be looking to see how many sales in the last 6 months to a year were other Realty One Group agents in that area, just to know if somebody happens to like have the corner on the market right there. You really would want to make sure the owner knows that. But if they haven't, say, okay, and then you have to advertise. You can't show it if you're a Realty One Group agent, sorry. But that's the agency form. I would prefer you do that up front. It's a lot easier. Conduct of brokers, regardless of who they represent, brokers have the obligation to treat all parties to a transaction fairly, disclose in writing all facts known to the licensee that may materially or adversely affect the consideration to be paid for the premises, and disclose to owner or buyer, disclose that owner or buyers may be unable to perform. Realtors are obligated by the National Association of Realtors Code of Ethics to treat all parties honestly. Now, I wouldn't necessarily read all of that, but it's not a bad thing to do. That is on your agency form. So if you've gone over the agency form at this point, I would say to Matt, look, we went over this. That was the full page form we signed first. I'm just going to skip and go to the next one. And this is talking about the limited representation, which hopefully you did discuss again on that agency, and what listing brokers cannot disclose to clients under limited representation. This is a couple of different places, but you need to disclose especially if the seller says, oh yeah, I wanted to tell you that my uncle died in our guest bedroom. It's like, okay, you're not obligated to, well, I'm not doing the right thing here. Whoops, sorry. Listing broker cannot disclose to clients under limited representation. Hopefully you've gone over this. Confidential information that the broker may know about a client without the client's express consent. Price or terms the owner will take other than the price without permission of owner. That's very important. Folks, if somebody has ever asked me, and I would say this directly to Matt, if somebody asked me, what will your seller take? I am not ever going to disclose that. First of all, I will tell you in 28 years, I have had plenty of clients tell me, I will not take a dime less than blah, blah, blah. Sure enough, written offer comes in for less than that. And they're like, give it to me. I want to sign. Like, wait, I thought you said so. Please, I really encourage you, do not ever, even if your seller said, this is my bottom line, that's not for you to convey. To me, what I would say is send me an offer and I'll present it, period. Right. But with the seller, I would be telling Matt, I am never going to communicate what your financial or your personal situation is. I'm simply going to encourage people to submit offers to you and give you the opportunity to respond to whatever those offers are. You may not like them, but I'm going to bring them forward to you to present. And in fact, I have let me just keep going here. The price and terms the buyer is willing to pay without permission of the buyer. So under limited representation, if a buyer says, I probably could pay another $5,000, you can't communicate that. If you are actually doing dual representation, you can't communicate both of those things, okay? Recommending or suggesting price or terms, because you're in a dual representation and you know in your mind that they can pay $5,000 more, you can't suggest to the seller, well, why don't you counter $5,000 back? I bet they'll be able to do that. You can't do that, folks. All you can say in a limited representation situation is, Matt, what do you want to counter? Or the buyer, what do you want to counter, right? You cannot talk about price or terms with either one of them, right? Because you may have information that is confidential.
Is it limited if any Realty One Group buyer?
Mhm. So even if you don't have that, if it's not dual, if you actually aren't talking to both parties, you still can't talk about price or terms, because you can do no harm to the other Realty One Group agent or client of a Realty One Group agent, because then you are doing harm to another Realty One Group client. Okay. So you can't say, I think that Matt, I think you should counter, $25,000 more. All you can say once you're under limited is, what do you want to offer? What do you want to counter? Are there other terms you want to consider? You cannot advise them. Okay.
How long do you sit on offer? You can offer a property.
They have a time on it.
in the purchase contract?
In the purchase contract, there is a deadline. Can you sit on it past that? Sure. But after that deadline, it's technically void. Right? Can you write in your counter line, whatever it is, 442 shall be amended to read, tomorrow at whatever, so that you bump out that deadline? Sure, you can. But usually buyers write offers with 24 hours response time, approximately. Think about it, folks. If you may not know where the buyer or the seller are. You may not know where the agent is, right? You may not know what they're doing in that next 24 hours. So if you've got somebody traveling, both parties could be crisscrossing, they could be on another continent, right? You have no idea of that. So be respectful of that. If you're sending an offer over at, 9 in the morning and say, I want a response at 6 p.m. Well, the seller could be working a job. They could be a nurse and on a 12-hour shift. Like, you don't know, or a doctor. You have no idea what their shifts are. They could be a firefighter with a 48-hour shift. So, I would be, unless they note in the comments, seller is difficult to reach, we require 48 hours. Unless they have something like that, standard rule of thumb is about 24 hours, right? I always look at it though, if you're sending it at 6 o'clock at night and you're asking for it back at 6 o'clock, you might want to push that a little later, thinking that somebody may have to have a conversation after work the next day to finish it up. I probably wouldn't put 6 to 6. I put 6, delivering it at 6 and response at 8 p.m. the next night. Give them just a little extra time to turn it around. So competing owners, just make sure that the owner understands that the listing broker, and this is Realty One Group, may have or obtain listings on other properties that potential buyers may consider make offers on or purchase through the listing broker. So that are similar. So consider putting a sign up. Let's say in McCormick Ranch, you put your sign up and you hold an open house, and maybe somebody else in the office is holding the open house, and neighbors 3 doors down come over and talk to the agent and say, we'd like to list our home next week, and sign on with that agent. It's not you, but somebody else with the Realty One Group, and all of a sudden another property very similar goes on the market. You got to explain to the owner, look, Realty One Group has 3,000 agents, over 3,000 in the Maricopa County area. It is possible that there will be another Realty One Group sign that will go up in your community, whether it's me or anybody else, and so just be aware of that. All right, I think that is where we are going to stop today. I'm going to stop sharing. Any questions from folks online? I'm going to stop recording.